1964, and after a promising amateur career at his first professional bout, just 17 years of age, he quickly became a draw card at Festival Hall in Brisbane, sometimes fighting on the same card as his brother Brian, on Boxing Hall of Fame. Becoming a very accomplished boxer, Mark displays a number of vastly experienced opponents in the next 4 years, and in his 15th bout, beat New Zealander Craig Parsons for the Australasian middleweight title. In his next match, he outpointed the undefeated Paul James for the Australian middleweight title and beat him by TKO in fences. Fought until 1990, then retired, making a comeback in 1997 when he won the Pan Pacific light heavyweight title. He then retired with the outstanding record of 23 fights, 23 wins, 13 by KO, one of very few undefeated Australian champions. That's good. He beat some excellent boxers, as the middleweight division at the time was full of talent. And there were a couple of things that I looked at that I thought were very interesting. Mark faced some very well-credentialed opponents during his career. In fact, in his entire career, only on 4 occasions did you fight somebody who had fewer fights than you. I don't know whether you knew that. That's a fact, yeah. He fought and beat 2 opponents who were Australian champions, 2 New Zealand champions, that'd be tough, and 2 Fijian champions. I don't know how you pronounce it, but it was Zachariah Faye, who had had 64 fights with only 10 losses when Mark beat him after 12 bouts. So that's a pretty terrific record. In retirement, thank you. In retirement, Mark built a boxing facility in Albury and trained amateur and professional boxers. He later relocated to Moranbah in Queensland, where he again trained boxers at the Moranbah Boxing and Sporting Club. He's worked at the Don King training camp in America with a number of world champions, amongst those he personally trained Craig Peterson, Dominic Fay and Carly Mead fought for the World Heavyweight title. And I thought it would be best to ask a few questions of Mark so that he can respond and everyone can understand and learn more about you, Mark. So if I just ask the question, give you the mic, will you right with that? Firstly, where were you born?
I was born in Brisbane, just up the road at Mark Hospital in 1964, so that's all about.
Who or what influenced you to boxing?
Well, my father was a big boxing fan, and he ordered a fighter magazine, and all through I basically learned how to read the fighter magazine, and I idolized all the boxers, and many of them were in this room that I followed, like Mr. Acceleration, Mr. Axel, and there's so many great fighters, the Moore brothers, and I just idolized every fighter, and I studied the game so intensely, and I knew from a very young age that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a professional boxer.
How did your amateur career go, and who was your first trainer, Mark?
I trained with, I was so lucky I had great trainers I trained for a gentleman called Noel Kelly, Dumpy Morris, and Con Russell. They were my 3 main amateur coaches that I had, and they were brilliant. They were brilliant trainers. They taught me well, but more than that, they were just brilliant people. They were just great role models for me, and so that's who I had my amateur fights with. And speaking of the amateur career, I'm so honoured to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, with the Bracken family, with Sally and that, and at times I didn't enjoy my amateur career all that greatly because, and one of the reasons is because of the Warwick Boxing Club. You know, like I grew up fighting against those guys, and whether you won or lost, it didn't matter. You knew you were going to be sore for a week because every one of those fights was so damn hard. You know.
Yes. Now you were pretty young when you turned pro, just 17. What made you decide to turn professional?
Oh, look, I had my last amateur fight at 14 and I got out of boxing for a while, and then I followed in my brilliant brother's footsteps. You know, he was a great fighter and I idolised him too, and it's just what I was going to do. There was no ifs or buts. I was going to be a professional fighter.
Now, I was fortunate enough to see 12 of your pro fights. You're a boxer with great balance, an excellent defence, very good attack. Who of your opponents, though, was the hardest to beat? Who was the toughest of your opponents?
To be honest, they were all tough. You know, even when I beat them quickly, they were all hard fights. But the two to stand out the most are Sakurove and probably the best fighter. I mean, even Dave Zarago was a great fighter, and also Paul James. I mean, Paul James had a great record, and the guy I idolised, the dirty rat there, he went in the opposite corner on me. Steve, good on you, mate. But he was trained by...
He's a Victorian too.
Yeah, no, which is great. But Paul James was a great fighter, and he beat a lot of guys that I'd watched fight, like Luca Faro and Ricky Peterson, and these were great guys, you know. Like, I knew they were good, hard fighters, so I knew I was in for a very tough fight that night, and I just scraped through it by the skin of my teeth, and then in the rematch, even though I stopped him in the rematch, was a much harder fight. Yeah.
What would you consider the highlights of your career?
Oh, well, obviously winning the Australian title. I remember sitting in the dressing room thinking, here I have got an opportunity to win a championship that Les Darcy, Ron Richards, Dave Sands, Tony Mundine, you know, like I was sitting in the dressing room thinking, damn, I'm about to fight for the same title that these guys had, and you know, I was going to do whatever it took to get over the line there, and as tired as I was and as hard as the fight was, that's the fight I really wanted to win. I wanted that championship, yeah.
You certainly did that, Mark. What prompted your retirement after such a marvellous career and at a relatively young age before one fight come back 7 years later?
Yeah, I just made a few poor decisions. Like I had a really good relationship with my professional trainer, Reg Layton, and he was a great promoter, and he promoted for 30, 40 years and filled it all up. And when I left Reg, I never found that same form again. I never, I wasn't the same fighter, and obviously, like the opportunities never came, and I had a young family, and I decided to look after the family as, I wasn't making ends meet. So that's what I was very young.
I remember coming into the gym, Wollongabba, and seeing you running on the spot, doing a run. Do you remember how many steps you used to take?
I don't know. Reg used to count them, and I don't know how he could count them, so I was very sceptical about his counting ability. He came up with some pretty incredible numbers, and I'm not sure if I could have really ran that quickly.
Well, it was a lot, Mark, I'll tell you that. You would have met a lot of great characters over your career, and I was going to ask whether any stood out in your memory, particularly. Reg Layton was the first one that I thought of.
Yes, he was just a great coach. I mean, I fought a lot of amateur fights, and of all those fights I had 2 stoppages. I couldn't squash a break, and then I went to Reg. He taught me leverage, he taught me distance, and actually gave me a fight plan to go into when I fought, to establish my jab, establish my distance, and once I established that, I looked for that right hand, and it worked for me. And believe me, like the first people I dropped, I was more shocked than what they were. I thought, how long has this been going on for? Why didn't someone tell me this years ago? It's a much easier way to fight. But so he was, and later in my career as a coach, training fighters and working in Donkeys, training campers, and just an unbelievable experience, and something I'm very proud of.
remember him?
Oh, he was trouble. He was trouble. He was a guy, him and his brother, you know, like I looked up to them, you know, like, reading about him in the Fighter magazine, and I could name everyone in the all of the rankings and that, you know. So, and I've always been more of a fight fan, you know, to get inducted with Sharon and Paul over there, you know. Like, I'll never forget the fights you had, mate, you know, like with you know, the fight with Glenn Kelly, how you destroyed him, and Thomas Adamek. I mean, what Thomas Adamek did after that, like, it was just an incredible efforts, man, you know, like, and I'm still, you know, I still feel goosebumps cheering for you on in those fights, you know. So, and then with the Bracken brothers also being inducted with them, it's such a win.
If you make a comeback, Mark, will it be light middleweight or middleweight division?
I'll probably struggle real hard, and if I try out good, I reckon I could come down to heavyweight.
Okay. Well, Mark, you're a very worthy inductee